Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:06. We got a super busy Tuesday ahead of us. Coming up at 7:35, Andrew Kerr from Washington Free Beacon has been covering the Hunter Biden trial, which began yesterday. And then at 8:05, Dr. Scott Atlas, part of Trump's COVID response team, and 8:35, Dr. David Asher, who led the State Department's investigation into the origins of COVID-19. Of course, both of those interviews, along with our next guest, Dr. Robert Malone, are linked to yesterday's testimony on the Hill, Anthony Fauci, under fire from House Republicans. I'm Larry O'Connor. Good morning, Julie Gunlock.
Good morning.
Let's get right to it because we got an important guest, Dr. Robert Malone. He is the original inventor of that technology, the mRNA technology that was used for the COVID-19 shot. His book, by the way, Lies My Government Told Me and the Better Future Coming, is really good stuff. Dr. Malone, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Larry. Good to be here, and thanks for the plug.
Here is one part of yesterday's testimony I want you to respond to. Listen to this.
Dr. Fauci, how much have you earned from royalties from pharmaceutical companies since the pandemic began in 2021?
Zero.
It says NIH scientists made $710 million in royalties from drug makers. You're saying that you did not receive any of the $710 million.
On COVID, I received, I think, $122 for a monoclonal antibody that I made 27 years ago.
Okay, so just in general, though, how much have you received, not related to COVID, just in general, how much have you received in royalties between 2021 and 2023?
I think none.
Okay, so somebody received the $710 million.
Somebody did, but not me.
Okay, which, again, I really wish they could laser focus onto the actual point, but maybe, Dr. Malone, you can pick up on that. What is the larger point here, whether Fauci made personal money, the scientist, $710 million in royalties from scientists at the NIH who were directly involved with mandating vaccines, like the shot that you were part and parcel in unwittingly in developing this COVID-19 shot.
The technology platform.
Yeah.
So what this refers to is a New York Post story based on disclosures obtained from Open the Books and Judicial Watch. And this was explosive information, just came out a couple days ago about this large amount of money, because NIH has tried to hide the figure and is still hiding who got the money. And Tony's being a little literal in his interpretation. He's saying he didn't get any of the money personally, which may be the case, because that money is going to get distributed to people who are actually inventors on a patent. Mm-hmm. But the bulk of that money actually doesn't go to the people that invented the thing or did the work. It goes to the institute. So Tony may not have personally received it, as a check to his bank account. But what it does is it yields a slush fund within NIH and within the NIAID that the director can use for whatever purpose pretty much they want to use. So indirectly, he received a very large amount of money in terms of supporting his division.
Well, and despite the fact that he's on the government payroll, although he is the highest paid government employee until his retirement, his net worth went up millions of dollars during the COVID-19 pandemic. And then even more importantly, that is very important, Dr. Malone, but then there's this line of questioning.
Did the COVID vaccine stop transmission of the virus?
That is a complicated issue because in the beginning, the first iteration of the vaccines did have an effect, not 100%, not a high effect. They did prevent infection.
Not 100%, not even a high effect.
Yeah,
he went on and meandered here, but Dr. Malone, why don't you answer the question?
Through this. Pardon?
I said he meandered and he filibustered and he never really directly answered, so I'd like you to answer that question.
So the data now is fairly clear that the product did not result in prevention of infection, did not prevent disease. The nuance is whether or not it had any impact on infection, and that disease prevention thing that he keeps emphasizing is clearly short-lived. He made a number of statements that were really the kindest thing I could say is he was cherry-picking the data, but the bulk of the data are not consistent with the statements he made about millions of lives saved. But the committee basically wanted to give him a pass. One of the things I found stunning about this testimony was the bipartisan nature, largely bipartisan nature, of what seemed to be an undertone of hero worship and enabling Tony to go along with this storyline that he did everything in his power. It was just circumstances in the moment. Basically, I think they have already decided who gets thrown under the bus. And it's Morenz and Daszak, and Fauci is not going to get held accountable for what happened here.
Dr. Malone, I'd like to continue on that thread. I was also shocked that they set it up so that Fauci could come off as the victim here. He started off talking about these death threats. He kind of got emotional about it. And everybody just sort of allowed this to happen. There was very little discussion of the suicides that occurred during COVID because people's lives were ruined, the learning loss and the problems, the mental health conditions we've seen among children because the teachers unions pressured the CDC.
He soft-pedaled that one.
He definitely
he really soft-pedaled that one.
Yeah, and I was really also disappointed to see that no one really talked about the myocarditis that had been developed. Nobody talked to him about the numbers.
This was staged.
Yeah.
And Tony was highly, highly coached. The only moment that really broke through his very careful, coached presentation, where he's presenting himself in kind of an aw shucks way, which as you know, I mean, those of us that live here in D.C. and have been watching him for decades, this guy is a combative bureaucrat. And we heard that come out in the clip that Representative McCormick played. And that was the one moment, I think, that kind of shook him. And it showed the real Anthony Fauci was displayed in that audio clip, that combative, in-your-face kind of smash-mouth attitude. That's Fauci.
Well played.
And it also came out in some of the Morenz emails, which Fauci basically did a blanket denial. I mean, Fauci threw a bunch of people under the bus. He threw the CDC under the bus. He threw Morenz under the bus. He threw the Great Barrington Declaration. He threw Jay Bhattacharya under the bus.
Dr. Malone, let's talk about all the people under the bus wheels in a moment, and I want to play that exchange that McCormick played with the interview clip of Fauci that you just said revealed the real Dr. Fauci. We're going to carry over for a second segment here, and I promise to plug your book a couple more times too, if that's okay.
That's okay.
All right,
let's focus on the topic.
Let's go out here and listen. This is, as you just heard from Dr. Robert Malone, this is the real Anthony Fauci.
Once people feel empowered and protected legally, you are going to have schools, universities, and colleges are going to say, you want to come to this college, buddy? You're going to get vaccinated. Lady, you're going to get vaccinated. Yeah. Big corporations like Amazon and Facebook and all of those others are going to say, you want to work for us, you get vaccinated. And it's been proven that when you make it difficult for people in their lives, they lose their ideological and they get vaccinated.
Are all objections to COVID vaccinations ideological, Dr. Fauci?
No, they're not, and that's not what I was referring to.
Well, in reference to making it hard for people to get education, traveling, working, I'd say it very much was in context. And I take great offense to this. Miss Allison Williams testified before this committee about losing her job because she sought an exemption for ESPN's vaccine mandate, which came from recommendations from bureaucrats like yourself. She and her husband were actively working with a fertility expert, a physician, on how to get pregnant, and agreed with the premise that she was young, healthy, wanted to get pregnant, and shouldn't get the vaccination for medical purposes. But she was fired because you made it hard, just like you said in your statement.
Right, that's the real Anthony Fauci, and he tried to squirm out of it. Dr. Malone, I'll get your reaction in a moment, but first, 7:15, WMAL traffic and weather.
Later this morning on the Chris Plant Show, what did the sainted Dr. Anthony Fauci lie, and when did he lie it? 9 a.m. on WMAL.
And we're unpacking that a bit as the pre-opening act for Chris Plant. Dr. Robert Malone, he is the author of the book Lies My Government Told Me and the Better Future Coming. He invented the platform that was used for the mRNA technology for these vaccines. And you just heard it there. Honestly, it sounded like an FBI wiretap of a mobster. talking about how they were going to, control the south side of Brooklyn there by making it impossible for people to have a life or livelihood if they don't get the shot that Fauci forced on them. How is there any other way to interpret that?
Yes, so this really is the real Anthony Fauci. He's very combative. That kind of aggressiveness has served him very well in the bureaucracy. And as I mentioned, we heard that come out in the Morenz emails, in Morenz referring to meetings he'd had with Fauci in correspondence with Daszak, and then also indirectly through Boston University, which Fauci denied, basically. He denied that he had this close relationship with Morenz. It's fascinating to listen, but Tony Fauci is extremely adroit at, let's say, gently misrepresenting the truth and evading questions. He's extremely experienced and skilled in manipulating Congress. It's what he's done his entire professional career. And clearly someone coached him. This whole self-victimization thread and the folksy nature, the use of first person in chatting with, I think it was the attorney for the Republican side in the end of the testimony. That whole folksy Tony Fauci, that's not him. That is all coached.
He kept calling the attorney by his first name. Oh, listen, geez, I don't know if Rand Paul pointed out, you talked about throwing Morenz under the bus. This has to do with communications with EcoHealth Alliance that was a partner with Wuhan Lab. When all of this started to come out and everyone started to do the typical federal government CYA, oh my gosh, we got this coronavirus leaked. It's in Wuhan. Obviously, we were involved in gain of function. That's when the email started talking about using back channels and various strategies to avoid FOIA requests. And I know that you were watching that with keen interest. Basically, was Fauci saying, I didn't have anything to do with that. That's all Morenz. You talked to him, but I certainly didn't do it.
Yeah, that was a fascinating exchange because one or the other of those two people is lying. And Morenz has Fauci basically said, I hardly know this guy. He's not really a senior advisor. We don't really talk. And yet we have these multiple emails from Morenz in which he reveals a very close working relationship and kind of, he can go to Tony's house to give him stuff if it's necessary. I mean, it's just totally inconsistent. Either Morenz is psychologically unbalanced, or Tony Fauci is lying.
Dr. Robert Malone is our guest. In his book, Is Lies My Government Told Me and the Better Future Coming? You saw this slow-motion train wreck with regard to the vaccine, people's life. I know people who lost their jobs because they had a religious objection to this vaccine. And whether you agree with that religious objection or not, we were in the unbelievable position now of either government officials or even worse, corporate CEOs and their HR departments telling somebody if their religious belief was valid or not for their own personal choices.
I think was the term, whether or not it was sincere.
Sincere, yeah. Your religious belief is insincere in the opinion of some Wall Street CEO or their HR head.
or more appropriately, their HR department, as you said.
Yeah.
So the whole issue of how religion was handled through this, and notably shutting down the churches, that is really starting to come to fore. And there seems to have been a little bit of title shift in the courts right now. It seems like those cases that were getting mooted and thrown out earlier on are now starting to gain traction, and the cases – I'm involved in one involving the LA Unified School District that looks like it's been allowed to proceed to trial.
Yeah, I've been watching that.
So that's a big deal. And there's a number of them now that are starting to get through the courts. The question is corporate America and these large public bureaucracies going to be held accountable for what they did? Well, that's more likely, I think, than any individual other than Daszak and Morenz being held accountable.
Dr. Malone, just a real quick question at the end here. Do you think, if another pandemic happens, which I wouldn't be surprised if one did, but Do you think these officials?
No.
Do you think public health? I know. Do you think public health has learned their lesson? I see no indication of that. But among your colleagues, what do you think?
I've just come back from Geneva from a protest rally against the World Health Organization and watching closely how Tedros jammed through the modification of the international health regulations on the in the last minute, when by his own guidance he has to give nation states for at least 4 months to review them. They don't care. This is smash mouth. This is it's totally consistent with what we're seeing from the Biden administration of this sense of catch me if you can and I'll see you in court.
Right.
It's the same thing. These are true believers that are absolutely invested in the thought that they are saving the world from this, or at least that's the persona or the face that they present to the rest of us. But the problem is this has just smacks of a great big psychological operation, and that is a deeper backstory. It's going to be very difficult, as always, to really get to the bottom of the role of State Department, DOD, and intelligence community. Whether or not it's open question of the origin of the virus, there's no question that there were multiple interested groups that took advantage of this crisis.
Well, we are going to get into the subject of the origins of the virus coming up at 8:35 with Dr. David Asher, who led the Mike Pompeo's State Department investigation at the time. Also at 8:05, Dr. Scott Atlas, who was part of the White House COVID team.
I'm really glad you got Scott on.
We got a good team here, starting with you. You were the point man, Dr. Robert Malone. His book, Lies My Government Told Me, and the Better Future Coming. And real fast, Dr. Malone, let's have Anthony Fauci have the last word on this.
Because I represent science.
There it is. Just want to make sure we get that in. Thank you, Doctor.
Yep, bye.
Now. On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:37 on O'Connor and Company. We're fresh off the heels of our interview with Dr. Robert Malone, analyzing yesterday's testimony on Capitol Hill of Dr. Anthony Fauci. Coming up at 8:05, Dr. Scott Atlas will help us do the same, as well as at 8:35, Dr. David Asher, who led the State Department's investigation into the origins of COVID-19. So we're all over that story yesterday, Julie Gunlock, but also yesterday was the first day of the Hunter Biden trial on federal gun charges. We got to get to that one too, and let's do so. Andrew Kerr is an investigative reporter for the Washington Free Beacon. By the way, Washington Free Beacon, 2 of the top 3 slots in the National Journalism Center's Dow Prize for Investigative Journalism. It's a great website with great reporting. But Andrew, listen, I have a lot of respect for you. I've known you for years. It doesn't take a great investigative reporter to get to the bottom of this. I mean, clearly Hunter Biden was on drugs when he purchased the gun, because he literally wrote about it in his own memoir. I mean, why are we even having this trial at this point, Andrew?
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a pretty heavy lift for the prosecutors here to prove that he was. In his memoir, he said that he was smoking crack every second of the day. Like that was his life in 2018.
And as you pointed out yesterday, there's contemporary text messages between he and his girlfriend at the time, Hallie Biden, also his sister-in-law, but that's a whole other story, where he talks about how he's standing on a corner waiting for his drug dealer to deliver for him.
Yeah, so that happened the day after he purchased his gun, and then also we reported last year that the day before he purchased the gun, he set up another drug deal with a guy named Q. So several drug deals the week that he purchased this gun is documented extensively on his laptop, and prosecutors plan to use that laptop during the trial. And Hunter Biden's legal team are reportedly going to raise questions about the authenticity of the files on that laptop, which again is going to be a very heavy lift, I think, for them, because everybody that's taken a look at this thing has come back with the same conclusion that it's legitimate, including the prosecutors, including every serious news outlet that's looked at it. I've commissioned an expert to look at it, came back positive. So yeah, I mean it's overwhelming against Hunter Biden.
Well, it is Delaware though, and we know that the Biden family sort of controls that state. Can you tell us anything about the jurors that were selected?
Yeah, jury selection happened yesterday. Opening statements are expected to be given this morning when the trial resumes. I can't say too much about the jurors. I mean, they asked the jurors whether their feelings about the Second Amendment. Some of them came back said that they had history with addiction. I can't say too much more about the jury. I wasn't at the trial yesterday, so I can't speak personally to the jurors
Their
in the
views.
room.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But these are 3 women. How many? Do you have the breakdown of who's making up this jury?
I don't know.
I think it's 6 women, 6 men, and then 4 women alternates.
Okay.
But it's Wilmington. I mean, the Biden family is they're like the Gambino crime family in Brooklyn. When it comes to Delaware.
Yeah, and the First Lady was there as a kind of a show of support for Hunter Biden, which is a bit ironic considering Hunter Biden's private thoughts about Jill Biden. He said some pretty unkind things about her being a vindictive moron in text messages. But she was there to support him. Joe Biden issued a statement yesterday saying that he's that he supports him as Hunter Biden as a father. He claimed that he is not going to comment on the trial, but obviously when the president of the United States is coming out with a show of support like that, it definitely sends a message.
So is this expected to be a long trial, Andrew? I mean, the evidence seems pretty clear. I have no idea what the defense might be, but I'm sure that they're going to say this is politically motivated or something.
Yeah, it's expected to last up to 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
So,
what?
Yep.
God. I'm sorry. What is there to do in 2 weeks? This is the form. You lied on the form. Here's how we can prove you lied on the form. Case closed. What am I missing?
That's a good question, but that's that's what the report's saying. It could last up to 2 weeks.
All right. Is there? Could you remind everybody, by the way, the details of the? Do we know why he bought this gun in the first place? Because he was under Secret Service protection, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's something that I spent. So I spent a lot of time looking through the laptop. Hunter's state of mind when he was purchasing this gun, and he just was leading this chaotic life at the time. He was in this bizarre relationship with his sister-in-law, the wife of his dead brother.
Yeah.
Extremely contentious relationship. I mean, he was just completely unhinged. It's just it's just madness. The life that he was living. So I unfortunately cannot. I mean, I have my speculation that I'm not comfortable sharing.
No, that's fine.
Sharing on the air.
No, I appreciate that. That sets you apart from other journalists in this town, Andrew. Actually, so it's laudable. Really quickly, though, remind people it was the girlfriend, the sister-in-law of the dead brother, who was responsible for disposing of the gun. Right? What did these responsible Democrat gun owners do with that gun eventually?
So Hallie Biden, freaked out that her crack addict boyfriend had randomly purchased a gun, and she was concerned, and so the gun was stored in Hunter Biden's car, and so she just went into the car. It was unlocked, took the gun and disposed of it in a trash can next to a Delaware high school.
There you go. Oh, a high school.
Yeah.
Well, that's better than an elementary school, I guess. Yeah.
Or,
all right.
Next to the school. And when Hunter found out, he went ballistic. Just this tirade of angry text towards to Hallie, and her response, and I can kind of appreciate it. She was like, "Hey, you shouldn't have a gun. This really scares me. I want you to get clean. This is I don't feel safe with you with this gun."
Yeah.
And Hunter responds is like, "Oh, great. You've ruined my life. You've given my gun to the FBI. You make me out as a, quote, abusive pedophile with homicidal tendencies."
Well, here's
they
the lie.
think you're scared to them.
If the shoe fits.
So yeah, I mean, Hallie was. I mean, I reported when I was at the Washington Examiner that Hallie that Hunter was considered the victim here in this situation because he did have his gun stored in his car, and then she technically broke in and took it. But like she seemed legitimately scared that this guy is not in the right state of mind and he should not have a gun.
Well, her testimony is going to be fascinating to watch, and I'm glad that she felt safer having it in a trash can across the street from a school than in the hands of her crack addict boyfriend, who was also her brother-in-law after her husband died, and is also, by the way, the son of the president, who has called this man the smartest person he ever met and has done nothing wrong. I think we've summed it up properly. Andrew Kerr, Washington Free Beacon, thanks for joining us, sir.
Thanks, Andrew.
They're the all-American family, the Bidens are.
Oh, yeah.
7:40. Well, the drama over at the WNBA continues. Caitlin Clark has drawn so much attention to the league. They're selling out arenas, especially when she's in town. Her team isn't doing very well, and she's having a rough time adapting to the pro game, mostly because opponents are coming up behind her, elbowing her in the back, calling her the B word or knocking her to the ground, and then celebrating that they've done it. There's real hatred here for Caitlin Clark in this league that has brought more attention and more accolades and more money to the players than ever before. But they hate her.
They absolutely hate her. And it is based on her race. It is based on the attention that she's getting. It's absolutely despicable. And very few officials are saying things. I mean, the people who should be. And
Clay Travis on Hannity last night sort of focused specifically on why this is happening.
It's not just race, though. It's also sexuality. Caitlin Clark is a white heterosexual woman in a black lesbian league, and they resent and are jealous of all of the attention and the shoe deal that she got.
That lays it out. It's a black lesbian league, always has been, and suddenly you've got the straight white woman getting attention.
And if I can just say that on The View, Sunny Hostin gave these girls permission to treat her this way by saying, it's white privilege, it's white girl, it's pretty girl, white girl privilege. So Sunny Hostin, who is an epic racist on The View, I trace this back to her. She essentially conveyed to these girls, Caitlin can be treated badly because she's pretty, she's white, she's heterosexual, exactly as Clay Travis put it.
This woman broke every collegiate basketball record, not just women's basketball.
Right.
She broke Pistol Pete Maravich's shooting record, point record, that stood for 4 decades in college basketball. And yet, no, she's just getting attention because she's white. Okay, whatever. By the way, Pat McAfee, who's a podcaster and broadcaster and really up-and-coming rising star for ESPN. He actually single-handedly got one of the ESPN executives fired. That's how much power this guy has. Yesterday, in giving a monologue about this, he referred to Caitlin Clark as a white B-word. He walked it back and apologized, but I'm just curious. He'll be on the air today for ESPN. If he had called one of the black players a black B-word, do we think he'd be on the air for ESPN
He'd be working at a
today?
Denny's. Are you kidding?